Do we want to pause that for a sec, Ashley, until Dr. Kelly's back?
We're already live on Facebook and everything's going, but I will, we can cut this out.
No worries, I'm back. I'm good. We're okay.
A lot going on in your house there, Ashley.
That's why I'm staying on mute, buddies.
All right, should we get going?
Let's do it.
All right. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm David Lerner. I'm a licensed acupuncturist and herbalist with a clinical focus in functional medicine. I'm one of the clinicians at Heart of Wellness in Olympia, Washington. Heart of Wellness is sponsoring this talk in conjunction with L-Nurta, who are the makers of ProLon. And we're going to be talking about the benefits of the ProLon 5-day fasting mimicking diet, which is a protocol that I'm very passionate about. And I do that myself every few months. And of all the patient recommendations that I make, I see some of the best clinical results using the fasting mimicking diet. So I recommend it really frequently to my patients. L-Nurta has been offering a $50 rebate for every box purchased of the fasting mimicking diet prior to May 31st, making it a really good time to try the diet if you're thinking about it. And because of the rebate program, I had decided to give 3 talks about the diet in the clinic and did the first one back in February, and then COVID hit. So we had to cancel the remaining 2 in-person talks. And we decided to move this to a webinar format, and being that Zoom has no borders, one of the new benefits of this new world we're all living in. We're incredibly fortunate that we have Dr. James Kelly, who lives in LA and is the medical science liaison for L-Nurta, giving the presentation tonight. Dr. Kelly, thanks for being here with us. And
thanks for having me, yeah.
Before presenting, can you tell us about your background?
Sure, yeah. So hello, everybody. I'm Dr. James Kelly. As he mentioned, I'm the medical science liaison for L-Nurta, the makers of ProLon. And my background, very briefly, I did my medical training and my externship in sports medicine, but did not practice. I went straight to MBA program to do early stage medical innovation and entrepreneurship. So initially I started in a startup in orthopedics that I helped launch, and then did a laparoscopy company, and then worked for the Cleveland Clinic for a couple of years doing basically Shark Tank for medical products. So as clinicians would come and pitch their ideas, we would evaluate them, regulate them, put them through the whole process of how you start a medical technology. So focused a lot on health and longevity in that space as well. But during my MBA, I had gotten to know Dr. Walter Longo at USC, who is one of the world's leading longevity research experts. He's the head of the Longevity Institute at the Leonard Davis School of Anti-Aging Medicine at the University of Southern California. And while I was there, I helped work on the business plans for longevity centers. And then fast forward about 5 years later, I'm working at the Cleveland Clinic, and I get a call, this is now about almost 5 years ago today, that they were going to launch this product, ProLon, and they would love for me to come on board as the chief operating officer, chief medical officer. And I jumped at the opportunity. The preclinical research and everything like that was really, really compelling. They've really put a lot of hard work and research dollars behind this. So I came on board, helped bring it to the market. And as we grew and sort of outgrew my skill set and interest, I transitioned over into the education side in the medical science liaison role that I'm in now. And I've been here for a couple of years doing this primarily around education, training, presentations, and helping people with any questions they may have. So that's very briefly my background. I'm happy to go into any part in excruciating detail into my early childhood and my fondness for dogs and all that stuff. But I figure that's good for now. So we can start there. Is that all right?
Great. Let's get into it.
Awesome. So hopefully, do you want me to just dive straight into the deck?
Yep, go for it.
Hopefully everybody can see my screen. There's a chat window that if you guys have any questions or comments or anything, you can do that. I highly encourage, feel free to interrupt me, or I should say interject, not interrupt. I want this to be here to serve you guys. So I'm here to talk to you guys a little bit about ProLon and what it is. And for those of you who aren't aware, hopefully you guys are all at this point, ProLon is a 5-day fasting mimicking diet, plant-based, real food, breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks, desserts, drinks, herbal teas, supplements, etc., to try to help you keep your body in a fasting state while still giving you food that can help preserve your lean body mass and make it a little bit easier. So I'm going to go through a little bit of the tips and tricks and how it does that, what the importance of fasting is and all of that. So by the end of this, you guys should have a pretty clear understanding of why we think this box and really why prolonged fasting is such an important tool. So that said, let's go on to the slide deck. So the first thing I always talk about is what are your goals with this, because everybody has different goals. So depending on where you're starting, if you have a significant amount of weight to lose, for example, or you have a lot of body fat and you want to get closer to what you want to be, what you think your goals are, what your waistline looks like, and healthy levels of certain metabolic markers, as well as energy levels. So depending on what your goal is, there's actually a lot of different stuff that can happen over a fairly short period of time with this really intriguing and interesting new concept. It's actually one of the oldest concepts in the world. So fasting is something that has been with us since the dawn of time, and we'll talk about that as well. So I kind of highlight this to everybody. People say, why would I want to do this? Well, have you ever said to yourself, I'm struggling to lose body fat and weight and don't want to lose my muscle? So that's one of the things a lot of people are concerned about, especially as we get a little bit older. It's a little harder to maintain muscle. It's very easy to add fat. So most diet plans are kind of generalized, and they do a lot of hard work over a very long period of time, and you just don't see the results. And so it can be really frustrating. So helping to maintain healthy levels of certain biomarkers, for example, maybe something else that your goals are. So if you want to, if you're afraid of doing a diet that may bottom you out and you want to do something that's going to be better for you, sorry about that. Energy levels and healthy choices. This is, for me, I'll just highlight personally, the main reason I do this. I think it's, and this is something we see very commonly in our surveys. We'll talk about the results in a sec. I don't want to spoil the surprise, but so brain fog, energy levels, cravings for food you shouldn't be eating. If that's something that you notice yourself doing a lot of, and now that we're all sedentary and at home and a bit higher stress and things like that, you can develop a lot of bad habits around eating and around energy levels and sleep patterns and things like that. So if your goal is to be rejuvenated, that's one of the great reasons to think about doing this. So now let's talk about what happens. So if we're talking about mimicking a fast for 5 days, the obvious question is, why would I want to fast? Well, so there's a couple different things that happen. So we have to drill into what we mean when we say fasting. So most people think of fasting as abstaining from food or beverage of some kind for some period of time. A lot of people talk about juice fasting or things like that. And what we really look at is more what's happening. So let's talk about biologically what fasting is. And that is when you run out of the nutrition you ate, your body has to switch over to using the sources internally. So biological fasting is after you've used up your last sugar from your last meal, which is about 12 hours, it takes about 24 hours to really kick into this biological fasting, which starts to trigger some changes at the cellular level. So that's really what we look at. We're looking specifically at what changes in your body when you fast. So when you remove sugar, you don't just go into ketosis. When you remove nutrition, you don't just go into ketosis. A lot of other stuff happens. So if you go to a starvation level, your body has these little sensors that notice food. And if you take away the food, those sensors turn off. And when those sensors turn off, cells switch from a growing state, because they are bathed in food normally, so they can make stuff. They go into a self-rejuvenation state, a stress-resistant non-growth state, where they do a self-assessment and they activate a pathway called autophagy or autophagy, which is self-eating. And it's if there are broken parts internally in the cells, the organelles, the mitochondria you may have heard of. So if you have misfolded proteins and you have damaged mitochondria, when you go into a fasting state for a long enough period of time, that turns on autophagy and it cleans up those things. So it makes your cells optimize themselves. So now, because you're not eating any solid food, some people think a juice fast is fasting, and that's not really true. Certain juice fasts may accidentally be fasting because they have low enough amount of protein or a low enough amount of sugar and not enough of something else that they actually suppress your nutrient sensing pathways that we were talking about. They actually send your cells into a fasting state. But in general, it takes a really, really specific set of macronutrients and stuff that we've spent at this point about 20 some years and almost $50 million researching to figure out how to trick the body to go into a fast with anything other than just pure water. And we'll talk more about that in a second. So, but in looking at how fasting can optimize the body, again, this is something that's been with us since the dawn of time. I actually usually talk about how fasting may be the main driver of the reason that we are here, because if the main goal of cells is to pass their DNA on, if they die between breakfast and dinner, they're not going to pass their DNA on. So they have to develop some mechanism to notice when they're out of resources and to change what they're doing to optimize their chances of passing on their DNA. So the response to fasting is what really drove us to develop. So this is one of the most powerful tools in the world, and every cell in your body has this built into it. But recently, we've gotten away from that. For 99% of time in human history, food was scarce. And then fasting became part of every major culture and every major religion. And then in the last 50 to 100 years, we've really developed into a constant fed state where you have easy access to food all the time. So we never get into this healthy cleanup renewal state that really occurs when you go into a couple days of fasting. So now these all help support longevity and health span. And when I talk about health span, what I mean is it'd be neat if we can make everybody live to 115. But if you feel terrible during that, it's not a very good life. So our goal, more than longevity even, is health span, a healthy number of years. So we maximize how good you feel throughout your life. So when you're 60, you feel 40. And when you're 80, you feel 55 or 60. So that we're just changing the curve of how you age. So that's what we mean when we say health span, is healthy lifespan. So when I first started here, no one had heard of fasting. They thought I was insane to join this company. But now, fortunately, several years later, that's changed dramatically. Intermittent fasting is now the most popular form of eating. And it looks like my video is lagging. So can somebody please confirm that my audio is not? You can hear me okay? Everybody can hear me okay? Great, awesome. So intermittent fasting is now replaced just about every other form as the most preferred eating habit, and it with good reason. There's a lot of great data showing that in terms of weight loss, for example, a chronic restrictive diet versus just eating a different pattern of eating throughout the day, you can actually get better and more sustainable results from intermittent fasting than you would get from a restrictive diet, like eating 500 calories less per day. And it's much easier to do. So that's why everybody's doing it, but it also has a lot of tremendous benefits at a cellular level. But not all fasting is the same. And that's what brings us to fasting mimicking diets and water fasts. So if you look at the most popular types of eating are all the way over here on the left. You see the time restricted eating, 16-8 and 12-12. Those are the most popular. You could also hear of a 5-2 diet where you're fasting 2 days out of the week and eating 5. Now, usually it's fasting 1, eating 2, fasting 1, eating 3 days. And then there's alternate day fasting where every other day you're eating 500 calories or less. And those are usually less than 2 days. Usually, so you'd see 5-2 diets less than 2 days a week. Prolonged fasting is really where the interesting stuff happens. That's where you get that cellular cleanup. It's more than 2 days. In fact, most studies show that that cleanup occurs primarily on day 3 and 4 of a water fast. So the two types of prolonged fasting, as we consider it, are water fasting and fasting mimicking diets. And just to review some of those benefits of what changes during these, if you look at caloric restriction, you're going to lose weight. It's not going to preserve your lean body mass because of the way the body works. It's going to eat your muscle somewhat. And it does contain food, and it's usually generally pretty safe. Most people can tolerate a caloric restriction and do pretty well. Intermittent fasting reduces weight. It doesn't necessarily protect lean body mass, but you don't lose it necessarily. And it doesn't contain food, so it is a true type of fasting. Whereas periodic fasting decreases weight. This is where you actually get that cellular rejuvenation. So this is 4 or 5 days of water fasting. You will see that cellular cleanup, but there's no food and there's questionable safety, which we'll talk about in a second too. There are some concerns around doing a pure water fast, aside from the fact that it's really, really hard. So if anyone's tried to do a water fast for more than about a day, you'll notice typically people drop out. So that's honestly one of the main reasons why Prolon got created, was that Dr. Longo was having trouble getting people to finish his clinical trials. So he had to figure out some way to trick the body into doing this. And that's where fasting mimicking diet comes in, which is you're going to see that weight loss change. You're going to preserve lean body mass. You are going to get that cellular rejuvenation just like you would in a water fast, but you get food, which can help improve safety. So specifically, it will help with things like holding on to more water, so you're less likely to be lightheaded and have low blood pressure. so it may help with headaches as well, and dizziness and things like that. You're also getting some nutrition that's going to help preserve your muscles. So water-only fasting, you will see that weight loss. You will see the same impact or stronger with metabolic health changes that you would see with a fasting mimicking diet. And it's going to do that cellular cleanup of your things like your mitochondria that may be older and more damaged. And it is going to help you feel better. Most people at the end of a water fast report what they call a fasting high, increased mental clarity, better choices, a lot of great stuff happens. But it's very difficult to do, does not preserve your lean body mass as we've mentioned before. And because you're depriving the body of a lot of these macro and micronutrients, you're not going to have that reserve to help support you doing well during it. And then additional to that, if you're not eating anything, your gallbladder is not moving around the bile in it that it normally uses when you eat a fatty meal. And if you let it sit there for too long, you do increase your risk of gallstones. So there's a couple things that can happen with water-only fasting for a couple days that may not be great, aside from the fact that it's just really hard to do. But if you look at fasting mimicking diets, it checks all those boxes. So it is validated clinically to do exactly what we say it does. It's plant-based, gluten-free, dairy-free, non-GMO, backed by $20 million or $56 million, I'm sorry, or 50 million-ish, and 20 to 25 years of preclinical and clinical research, carefully developed, patented. We have the world's first and only longevity patent, and we've been published in top medical journals. But just to give you guys a little bit more idea of what it is, I've got a box here to show you in case you haven't seen one before. So this is how Prolon comes. It's a box of 5 days, and each day is packaged in a convenient box that you could carry along with you. And it's got all of the items in it, and I would take them out and show you, but I think it gets a little messy. But we also include a meal card that tells you and can fit in each day box, so you can carry this with you. And it kind of gives you an idea of how you should be eating during the diet. And sorry, I think it might be reversed, but breakfast, lunch, dinner, it just does the thinking for you. You can eat it in any order you want for each day. You can't bring one day over to the next day. But if you just follow the results, the cards on it, it's pretty easy to get the diet done in an effective way. And when you're done, you'll get all the same results that we show in our clinical trials more than likely. But just to show you what happens on day one's got about 1,130 calories, but it generally feels like more. And that's just transitioning your body slowly into this fasting state. Breakfast is this healthy nut bar, which if anyone's had it, it's absolutely delicious. It's one of my favorite bars, period. It's also pretty beneficial that it happens to help with a fasting state while filling you up because it's got some really good healthy fat, honey for sweetener, for a sweet taste. And even though it is fairly sweet, because of all the fat and the fiber in the bar, it's going to lower the glycemic index, so it's not going to blast you with a bunch of sugar in your bloodstream. Also, as you transition into day 2 to 5, calories drop to about 800 or less calories per day. And we add in an L drink or longevity drink, which is glycerin. And the reason we do that is because as your body transitions into a fasting state, your body will not really produce enough ketones to power itself till closer to day 3. And so from half of the first day until day 3, your body's going to be looking for energy. And we're giving you some, but normally it would look to the muscle tissue, the glycogen stores in the muscle, and in some cases even the amino acids that make up the muscle tissue, as well as the stores of glycogen in the liver. But if I give you glycerol on day 2, 3, 4, and 5, when you're in a fasting state, your body can use that for energy. So it's kind of like an energy drink. You drink it throughout the day. You pour the L drink into the water bottle and fill it up with water, and you drink that throughout the day for energy, and it gives the body something to eat other than your muscle tissue. So that's one of the things that helps preserve lean body mass. And as I said, on day 3 and 4 is really when you're getting that autophagy, that cellular cleanup and renewal. So that's really the key days to the diet. So the reason it's 5 days is because these are the days that you're getting most of the cleanup, and then it peters out over day 5, and some other cool stuff happens on day 5. And of course, fat burning is occurring throughout the whole thing. You may go into ketosis. Some people go into a mild, some people go into a full ketosis. Ketosis is more like a side benefit of the diet. The real benefit is that cellular renewal and rejuvenation that doesn't need ketosis to happen. They usually happen together, but they're unrelated. So if you're measuring your ketones and they're not as high as you like, that's okay. Not everybody's get there. That doesn't mean you aren't getting the full cellular cleanup. So, but just to show you a little bit of the results, because we want to prove to you it does what we say it does, we did a clinical trial where we did 100 people were consented to do this trial, and they did 3 cycles over 3 months. And the reason we did that is because If you do it once, it's like going to the gym once. It's good for you. You're going to get some benefit, but you're not going to meaningfully develop that change you're not going to look a whole lot different. You're not necessarily going to have a lasting benefit. But if you get in shape, then you don't have to work out as often and you get to keep that form. So once you do 3 cycles, you really develop what they call metabolic flexibility. So it's easier to get into a fasting state, less likely to have trouble transitioning into it. You're going to maintain the results for a lot longer, and I'll show you those results in a second. But in general, the first thing people notice is weight loss. They tend to feel really good, but they also notice they lost a bunch of weight. So the weight is really kind of also a side effect of the diet. People tend to lose on average about 5.5 pounds, but that's an average. So if you're lighter, you're going to lose less. If you're heavier, you're going to lose more. So it's usually about 3% of your body weight. So if you're already close to your ideal weight, you may not lose as much, but you may have quite a bit of visceral fat that you're carrying around, because primarily what we burn is the central fat, the visceral fat that surrounds the midsection, which is generally hormonally active, the bad, the unhealthy fat. So you lose about 1.5 inches off your waist over the 3 cycles, which is a total of 15 days. So not a lot of work for 1.5 inches. It's, again, primarily visceral fat, so your BMI is going to improve. And we preserve lean body mass, which is different than a water fast. So, but as I mentioned, Dr. Valter Longo, the pioneer of this, what he did was really pretty clever. So here's the story behind why it does what it does. So he looked at the longest living people on Earth, the centenarians, or blue zones as some people call them, and tried to figure out what they do that helps live so long. Now, a couple things like their lifestyle, community, purpose that are modifiable, you can change that, but it's not as easy to uproot yourself in the Western culture. They all kind of do that. But there's another thing they do that we don't, that is sort of what drives us to look at fasting. And that is that they all eat a fairly low protein, high healthy fat and complex carbohydrate diet. So they all have what the lower IGF-1 level. IGF-1 is insulin-like growth factor 1. This is the body's primary mechanism to drive growth and also aging. So when Dr. Longo looked at these populations, Okinawa, Japan, Sardinia, Italy, Nicoya, Costa Rica, Loma Linda, California, and Lerner, Ecuador, one stood out, and that's the Lerner. And if you're not familiar with them, they're about 3 feet tall. And they don't eat particularly healthy diets. They smoke fairly heavily. They, generally speaking, shouldn't be as healthy as they are. But they're extremely healthy. They don't get diabetes. They don't get cancer. They don't get heart disease, even though their neighbors who are eating the exact same diet are getting those things on a fairly regular basis. Now, why don't they get those? Because they have a mutation in their IGF-1 pathway. So they're unintentionally living a longevity diet. They can eat all the meat in the world because IGF-1 primarily responds to animal protein, and they don't grow. They also don't get those age-related diseases, diabetes, cancer, heart disease. So this is sort of an aha moment. Okay, so IGF-1 we know is associated with growth, so it's a growth pathway, and it's associated with age-related disease. So growth and aging are now linked. Also, IGF-1 responds to nutrition. So now we know that nutrition can affect the speed at which you grow and age upstate without starving it completely. And that's where fasting mimicking diets came from. And that's really the brilliant thing Dr. Longo figured out, was how to tie together nutrition, growth, and aging. So as I mentioned, fasting mimicking diets have been shown to help promote cellular cleaning, reduce body weight and fat, and decrease IGF-1, which is that pathway that's been implicated in aging and age-related disease. So if your main goal is rejuvenation, we've shown very clearly in our clinical trials, IGF-1 goes down, and a lot of great other stuff happens, which I'll show you on the next slide. So this is designed really to optimize your wellness, which I know is sort of a catch-all term, but it really is true, because every cell in your body gets the same signal to go into this fasting state and to rejuvenate. So there's a lot of benefits because of that. So you see things like maintenance of a significant amount of changes of metabolic markers. And as I mentioned earlier, we did 3 cycles because that's what really gets you kind of in fasting shape. If you do this once, you'll probably lose quite a bit of weight, but you may notice that you'll gain some of that back over the next couple weeks. In our clinical trials with 3 cycles, we measured people almost 4 months later, and they still had, as you can see here, they had about 64% maintenance of weight loss without changing any lifestyle or diet. So these people did not adjust. They went back to their bad American habits as soon as they finished. And they still had more than 60% of the weight loss 4 months later. I don't know of any other intervention I can do where if I stop the intervention, 4 months later, you still have 60 to 90% of all of the metabolic changes that you saw without any extra effort on your part. So these people all return to their normal diets. In the real world, when people switch over to a Mediterranean style diet or improve their exercise habits, etc., their benefits continue. In fact, in many cases, they keep improving. So great weight management effect, great maintenance of that, great way to switch over to a healthy lifestyle because we help you maintain healthy levels of things like growth factor 1 and systolic blood pressure. So IGF-1, systolic blood pressure are maintained at a healthy level, which also means that if you're on a lean side, we're not going to bottom you out. So if your blood pressure is within normal limits, we've demonstrated very clearly that our systolic blood pressure impact isn't that significant if you're in that healthy range. So we're not going to bottom you out and become hypotensive or low blood pressure. And we also saw that people in surveys felt it was much easier to make healthy choices. Energy levels were much higher. Brain fog was lifted. So mental clarity improved. They were, their cravings were reduced. And that's actually one of the things that a lot of my colleagues use it for. So for me, the weight loss is really neat. The other benefits are great, but for me, it's the behavioral change. Much easier to make healthy choices, avoid my cravings, reduce my interest in things like, I'm from Ohio. I'm an Irish guy by genetic descent. So steak is like my dream, but every bit of research we see coming out basically shows that I shouldn't be eating any more of that. And it's really hard for me to stay away from it. But if I do even one cycle of Prolon, that craving is reduced. And with multiple cycles, it's much easier for me to transition to a Mediterranean style diet. So if you're looking to kickstart a healthy lifestyle, this is a great way to do it because it is kind of a mental and emotional and physical detox from your cravings. It also can help reduce caffeine cravings, which, by the way, if you're a caffeine drinker, here's a little pro tip on the diet. Going into the diet, you're going to want to reduce your caffeine ahead of time because you can't have more than 1 cup per day. But if you're a big caffeine drinker, I do encourage you to have your cup of caffeine. So 90 milligrams of caffeine, which is 1 cup of black coffee, no cream or sweetener, or 2 cups of black or green tea that are caffeinated, or 6 cups of decaf is really the upper limit. Any more than that, you start to reactivate one of the pathways that we're trying to inhibit. So you can kick yourself out of a fast. So wean yourself down if you drink a lot of caffeine. Otherwise, day 2, as you're transitioning into a fasting state and going through caffeine withdrawal, can be a little bit uncomfortable. But that being said, when you're done with a diet, most people don't crave as much caffeine, and most people don't crave most of the other stuff. It's much easier to maintain a healthy lifestyle. So just to summarize, and then we'll answer all you guys' Q&A. IGF-1 is really important for maintaining healthy aging and kind of optimizing how you're moving through the aging cycle. High IGF-1 is associated with high growth. And high growth is just using up your cells much quicker and accumulating all the damage from rapid cell growth. So while growth can be great when you're trying to build muscle, it's also rapid aging. So if we optimize you at the levels that IGF-1 should be at, ideally, we're going to optimize you and keep you in a healthy aging state. We also help maintain healthy levels of systolic blood pressure and other things like fasting blood glucose. And we maintain healthy levels of lean body mass, which is, again, different than a water fast. And we significantly reduce abdominal fat and body weight. So those are some great benefits. There are other ones as well, but those are the most readily visible ones, and they help you to maintain your healthiest lifestyle, we feel. So that being said, I do want to open it up to questions and answers. I got a ton of info for you, and I'll do my best to share it as you guys ask it, but thanks for sitting with me through that. I hope that was somewhat informative, and let's open it up to you guys. So I know there's a chat window on the right, and I'm going to let you talk, David.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much. That was awesome. That was really informative for me too. So I really appreciate it. And I have some questions I wanted to ask you. And if I'm not asking questions that other people have, please put them in the chat window. How often? So we talked about for somebody who really needs intensive care, they should ideally do once a month for 3 months in a row. Mm-hmm. For other folks, how often should they be fasting?
Yeah, and that's a good question. The reality is that we really only have a published clinical trial on those 3 cycles in people with an average BMI of about 27. So It is a little bit individualized, and it does depend on your goals. So generally speaking, we do see people elect to do it about once every 3 to 4 months. So 3 or 4 times per year to just sort of keep cleaning up whatever they've accumulated, sort of optimize their behaviors and healthy choices and things like that. So it does vary, and you probably do want to check with your clinician. And if you do, by the way, I should say, if you have a medical diagnosis or prescription medication, you need to go through your healthcare professional to get this diet. Don't try and buy it from our website. You do need health counseling just to make sure you're a good candidate, because not all medications play well with this and fasting in general. So if you are thinking about doing a prolonged fast, always check with your healthcare provider first, especially if you have an underlying condition. But again, it varies for everybody. So again, depending on your goals, you may want to do it more frequently, like for more weight loss. But really the only thing we have is that published 3 cycles in a row. So that's really what I have the most info on. So
great. Other than the caffeine hack that you mentioned, any other tips you have for kind of minimizing the challenges during the fast and making it as easy as possible?
So a few things you can do. One is hydrate adequately. Now, what that means varies again from person to person. If you're somebody who drinks a lot of water on the diet, you're probably going to need to drink even more. There's less salt in this diet than most typical American diets. There's about 1.7 to 1.9 grams per day. And I apologize, the cats are making an appearance. But because of that, salt helps you hold on to water. So if you're not getting as much salt as you usually would, you're going to find yourself urinating quite a bit and letting go of some water, which can certainly make things a little bit harder. One of the more common side effects people report is a mild headache, also weakness and fatigue. Hydration helps with all of those in many cases. So at least 32 fluid ounces per day, which is one of the water bottles that's included in the kit. Many people need to drink 2 to 3 times that. So it certainly varies. But again, whatever you normally drink, probably more than that. And even if you're going to the bathroom and you're urinating clearly, that doesn't necessarily mean you're hydrated. You could be letting go of water, actually. So that's one. Stay active, too. Gentle yoga, brisk walking can help. Those will all help your body sort of maintain its tone. From a blood pressure standpoint, it kind of helps keep you out of what they call vasovagal syndrome, which can increase in some people during fasting. So we want to be careful there. We generally advise against extensive working out because of 3 reasons. One, if you work out to the point of soreness and fatigue, you're going to release growth hormones, which is the opposite of fasting. So it may actually inhibit the benefit a little bit. 2, the more you work out, the more calories you burn, the more deficit you're going to have. So your body's going to be out of more energy. So you're more likely to be lightheaded. And then 3, the more you work out, the more your body's going to need calories, and it may go looking for them. And one of the great energy stores in your body is your muscle. So you may actually lose muscle tissue if you work out. So a couple tips are: take it easy, drink plenty of water, get plenty of rest too. That helps as well. Some people notice changes in their sleep habits. Most people sleep more deeply and more, they sleep better in a fasting state. But some people sleep a little bit worse. So that can just be ready for that in certain cases. And there are a couple other things you can do to optimize it. If you, the weeks prior to the diet, eat a really nutrient dense, plant heavy diet, really build up your vitamins and minerals and reservoirs of some of the healthier nutrition, and also optimize your gut to sort of accept more cruciferous vegetables, more fiber. That can make the diet a little bit easier too. So,
could you talk about post fast? What is, do folks need to be on a specific diet, or is there flexibility in terms of diet options?
Yeah, so Dr. Longo wrote a book called The Longevity Diet, where he looked at essentially all the data we have on what everybody is eating around the world and who's doing the best, and evolutionarily who did the best over time. And it always comes back to Mediterranean style diet. In general, most research, independent of Dr. Longo, has shown that that really is sort of the optimal diet. We actually have a company that we partner with called Nutrition for Longevity that's created basically a 3-day farm to table meal program that they deliver within about 48 hours of harvesting right to your door. That's kind of based on the longevity diet. Very, very clean, no pesticides, optimally balanced based on the research Dr. Longo did to really provide your body the example of what you should be eating. And it's usually about 60, 30, 10, 60% complex carbs. So legumes, squash, sweet potato, rooted vegetables, etc., cruciferous greens, about 30% healthy fat from nuts, olives, olive oil, avocado, places like that, and then protein from plant-based sources as well if you can. So that would be primarily nuts, like and nuts and beans. But if you're going to eat animals, avoid red meat as much as you possibly can. If you, generally speaking, healthy fatty fish like salmon, low mercury fish, and shellfish as well. So that's kind of the ideal human diet. If you're over 65, you probably want a little bit more protein. So, and he says 60, 30, 10 for most of us. If you're over 65, you're going to want to increase that probably to about 15%. But again, the sources are what matters too. So primarily plant-based and low protein. That's just going to optimize kind of how you stay healthy aging. So.
Okay. For folks who are used to doing a 16/8 time restricted feeding and they're not hungry in the morning, is it when they're fasting, it is a problem for them to stay on that 8-hour window?
Yeah, so that's a good question as well. Ideally, everything in the box is designed to be fasting mimicking, so you could really eat it at any time during the day, and it should be giving you a similar result. Now, obviously, if you ate everything at one sitting, that might have a different effect. We didn't really study that. Not too many people in our clinical trial were doing that. But as a whole, it seems to still do very well metabolically. If you want to condense everything into an 8-hour window, so you're used to that eating style, that works just fine. The people in our trial who did that still seem to do just the same. So certainly is an option.
And for folks who do time restricted feeding, who aren't doing the fasting mimicking diet, if they use the fast bar in the morning, does that not break the fast? I mean, what's the
yeah? So and your button. Yeah, you're butting right up against one that I would love to be a little more clear about, but we're still validating that. I'm actually up right here, of all things. We're doing one of our internal studies of validating all of that. We've done a couple already to demonstrate that it keeps you in a fasting state. And because the fast bar is based very similarly on the bar in the diet that's been validated to help keep you in that fasting state, it looks like it probably would. But we want to make sure that we have all of the data. So up until COVID hit, we were running clinical trials down in the South that we're going to study that in great depth. We're not there yet, so we're putting on pause. So for now, we just say it's a very healthy snack bar. It's got high healthy fat and fiber, so that even though if it gives you about 6 grams of sugar, it's going to delay the absorption of it. Your body's going to see much less than 6 grams. So that would keep the curves where you want them to be. So if you're already in a fasting state, it may help you maintain your fasting goals. So
do we know if it would throw you out of ketosis?
So again, the studies we've done are small, so I have to kind of bite my tongue on that one. But and certainly not large enough to make any claim, but exciting, leading us to the hypotheses to do the larger trials. So more to come. Sorry, I can't really answer that one definitively yet.
No problem. Those are the questions I had. So if anybody else has any other questions.
A couple that came through. One is, am I just losing water out of your muscle? So some of the weight you lose probably is a little bit of water. Most of it is probably, most of it's been shown from DEXA scan in our clinical trials to be visceral fat. So if you measure your body composition, and again, if you're only doing one cycle, it is very common to regain a significant amount of that weight back. It's not going to go away forever. You've not permanently changed your body. You're still you. And it's like going to the gym once. Doing 3 cycles is really where we see that lasting change, and they do maintain the weight loss far longer. Just about everybody maintains their lean body mass. So their muscle mass doesn't really change that much. Some people will dehydrate more, especially people who are starting much leaner than others because they just don't have as much visceral fat. So they may lose, and it's usually not the water out of the muscles, usually the glycogen, the stuffing that powers the muscles when you run out of glucose from your diet. So, and that is rapidly rebuilt over the next 2 to 3 weeks. So if you did lose your glycogen, you are going to build that back up, and that would regain some weight. I would say, again, anecdotally, because we didn't do a clinical trial on one box, anecdotally, most people would expect to, if they lose 3 pounds, probably gain a pound and a pound and a half back. I'm speculating, everybody's different. But the first time you do it, I generally encourage people to commit to 3 cycles precisely because of that. It does train the body to keep the weight off more. It doesn't seem that they gain it all back, even if they just do 1. And if you make healthy lifestyle changes, you're obviously going to do better. A lot of this is training your brain. And once you do 1 cycle, you'll get what I'm talking about. I don't get paid on sales, by the way, I should be clear. I'm just presenting the data here. But if you want to do it, I really encourage people do the 3 cycles. Each time you do it, it gets easier. Any side effects you may have experienced are less common and less severe. Your body really adapts well to it. You really are training yourself to be more metabolically flexible, and the results are going to be much more impressive and last much longer. So no, we do not sweeten the foods with stevia. The only sweetener in the diet is honey, natural source. It's one of the only non-plant-based items in the diet is honey because it's an animal product technically. We do not add sweeteners though. And nobody's done a great study on stevia and fasting, so we avoid that. We actually tell people don't add stevia to your tea or your coffee. You are allowed to add herbs and spices, flavor them as much as you like. You can have 2 slices of a lemon if you want to squeeze that into the teas or anything like that. Just don't eat them. And if you're really having trouble getting through your day and you're really dragging or feeling extremely lightheaded, lay down on the couch or bed, drink some water. And if you need 2 slices of an apple as a rescue, you can, or a slice of cucumber or some celery. So other supplements, there are supplements in the diet. We have algal oil, which is a plant-based, it's an algae omega-3. So instead of getting it from fish, it's basically fish oil, but from algae, so plant-based. And we give you an amount that we think helps sustain the body, but isn't to the level of a true supplement. We're trying to just provide the things that you would need during a fast. We have a pill called NR1, which is a vitamins and minerals and plant powder, just to help support you as well during the fast. So that's one of the reasons why we say discontinue your supplements unless your clinician advises you to continue them. Partly because we provide the stuff and partly because we know that we hit it at a level that we don't think will interfere with the diet, and supplements might. They also might artificially make your cells think they're healthier than they are, so they wouldn't get the full rejuvenation. So I don't have much visceral fat. Is this still beneficial to burn off other fat? Most people have more visceral fat than they think. So if you're using something like an InBody to measure that, it's a great product, but it's not complete. It's a variation of about 5% from accuracy. So even people who are in great shape still have organ fat that they aren't aware of, unless they're doing repetitive prolonged fasting, which is really the only way to burn all of your visceral fat. So, and your body will preferentially burn fat in the middle of a fast. So day 1 and 2, it's still transitioning into it. Then it'll burn fat, even cutaneous fat. And then eventually after about 2 to 4 weeks, it'll start to move towards muscle again. So there's a little protein sparing window. So conceptually, yeah, it would still be beneficial to burn other fat. But again, our clinical trials were on people with plenty of visceral fat. So it's a little hard to say definitively. It seems like it would, though. Pricing program is very much dependent on which price you're talking about. Usually it's 1 cycle of 5 days. As a reminder, you're not buying any other food while you're on it. So for the 5 days, you're going to have a 0 cost of other food. So just keep that in mind. And most people spend more than they think they do on food, especially if you drink any alcohol. It's actually ends up being almost cost neutral for some people. But regular food doesn't give you the benefits this does. So I kind of highlight that too. Flex spending, I know what you mean by that. I've heard some people be successful. It's not something we advertise. So we tried to register for that. It's a very complex process. We're still working on that, but I don't think this qualifies. So I definitely wouldn't advertise on that. How much body fat does one usually lose? I only lost 0.6. I would love to speak with you about that. If you want, by the way, I'm here for any discussions about anything. So a lot of it depends on age, gender, hormone status, recent weight loss, fitness levels, visceral fat. Typically people lose about 3% of their body weight, of which about 80 to 85% appears to be fat. So percent body fat sort of depends on what you started with, but 2% of the 3%, so 66% of the weight lost tends to be fat based on our clinical trials, or more, up to like 86%. But again, we didn't really quantify it to that level in our published trials. So I'm sort of presenting a best analysis on that. So, but again, 3 cycles is for people who are refractory, who didn't lose what they were expecting the first time. And I apologize if this sounds like a sales pitch. That really does seem, some people need the 3 cycles to really kick them over the hump. So if they're kind of stuck, that's one of the times we do see a bigger benefit from multiple cycles. So I recognize that's a commitment, but I think it's worth it. So did I miss any questions? No, that looks good. All right. I'm trying to think of ones that usually people ask. We've covered exercise. We've covered, don't go into super hot or super cold temperatures while you're on the diet. Certain people are a little more sensitive to vasovagal syndrome, so they're a little more likely to get lightheaded if they get up or down too quickly, or if they move from hot to cold or cold to hot. So don't do cryo or saunas during this diet. That can be a problem. Now, some people do just fine when they do it, but we're definitely not encouraging that. And then what else? Let's see. Do you have any specific questions? Oh, people who shouldn't do the diet. So I didn't really talk about that. So there are people who this is not designed for and not ideal for. So if you're over 70, you need to be evaluated by a clinician before doing it. And right now, while we are in the middle of this pandemic, we want everyone to be extremely careful. And if you're over 65, because that's the high risk group with COVID-19, and no one's done a great study on the impact of fasting during the fast on the immune system, we don't want to potentially put you in trouble. So if you're over 65, we discourage it. If you are under 65 and well quarantined and generally healthy and no one around you is ill, now is as good of a time as any to do this. So that's a little caveat. If you're allergic to nuts, the diet has plenty of nuts. It's really tough to get around them. So not really the diet for you at the moment. If you are BMI of under 18.5, or if you are under the age of 17, or if you're pregnant or breastfeeding, not the diet for you. If you're on any medication, again, go through your doctor before attempting this. Doing 16-hour fasting, eating ketosis for 6 months, that's great, good for you. I have plateaued and wonder if the diet could maybe benefit good cholesterol since it has more carbs. So cholesterol is one that we don't really make a health claim on. We did check that in the clinical trial. There were some impact, but we want to be careful on what we state. So I apologize if I can't really answer whether that'd be good for your cholesterol. I do know that a lot of people who have plateaued, if you've been in ketosis for 6 straight months, there could be a rebound. I tend to think that the weight loss and the metabolic changes are not directly related. So even if you don't lose weight, you may still experience some metabolic health benefits. So, but again, I'm going to be a little vague because we don't really have great data that's on what they call statistically significant on that. So. Any other questions you thought of while I was rambling on?
No, I think we covered a lot of ground. I thought that was great.
Metabolic benefits would include systolic blood pressure maintained at a healthy level, IGF-1 being maintained at a healthy level, the visceral fat levels, waist circumference, maintenance of lean body mass. Those are all metabolic parameters. There are a bunch of other ones, but yeah. And again, I have to apologize. There's a lot of rules around what I can and can't say. So, and I'm not trying to imply anything. We genuinely want to make sure that we are sticking exactly to what we can validate, we can prove, we can show you, we can do it. I think it does a lot of great stuff, but so that's a great. These questions around sales are not really my suit. So if you want to go over those,
I'm going to talk about that, and I'm going to talk about the Facebook group that we're going to start to do a group fast. So thank you very much, Dr. Kelly. Really, really, really appreciate you taking the time to be with us. That was great. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Should I be ducking off then?
Yeah, you can drop off, and I know you're busy, and then I'll talk to everybody about the Facebook group.
I appreciate everyone's time. Thank you so much for the great questions. You guys are wonderful, and I appreciate your patience with us, and look forward to working with you. And again, if you guys have any questions, you're welcome to reach out to us. We'll do our best to answer them, but always, I think David's a wonderful resource for you guys, so please go through him if you can. So, all right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
You guys have a great night.
Yeah, you too. In answer to your question about purchasing the boxes, yes, we sell them at Heart of Wellness. The retail price on the boxes is $250, and we actually reduce all our supplement prices 10%. So they're $225. And right now we have 12 boxes that we're selling for $210. So the first 12 people who want to purchase them can get them for $210. Then the price goes to $225, which is the normal price. And if you want to buy it via FullScript, which is our online distribution source, it's also $225. Right now there's the $50 rebate. So it's and that's on as many boxes as you buy. So if you buy 10 boxes, you would get a $50 rebate on all of those. So now's a really, really good time to be trying this. With the $50 rebate, it brings the cost down to $160 or $175, depending if you get one of the 12 boxes, it's $210. So that was the reason why we're doing these talks now, because I recommend this all the time. People are held back by price, and this really, really helps it out. Also, considering like what Dr. Kelly talked about, you need to back out what you normally spend for food for 5 days, which brings the price down even more. We are going to also have a private Facebook group, fasting group, that's going to start on May 30th. I'm going to be leading that. I do this like every 3 months, and I'm due now, so I'm going to do it start that on May 30th. And if you're interested, you'll need to order a kit directly from Heart of Wellness. And then, like I said, the first 12 kits, the price is $210. After that, it's $225. More information about this is going to come to you after the webinar. Just follow the directions in that email, and you'll be sent an invitation to join the Facebook group. Once you're in the Facebook group, you'll have access to an intro video that I'm going to be doing, daily motivational and informative posts. I'll be answering questions that people have, and then a wrap-up video with me. Any other questions? Do you know if we can flex this? I don't know. You know, I guess the question is, it's considered, I would assume it falls under nutritional supplements. So the question, if you can flex nutritional supplements that you purchase from Heart of Wellness, I would assume so, but I guess it really depends on the insurance company, the HSA or flex spending account that you're working with. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you everybody for taking time out of your evening to be with us. Really appreciate it. Hope to see you on the group fast. And thank you very much. Have a great night.